Hello viewers, my name is Natasha May and I'm an educational developer in the Teaching Commons. And today we'd like to talk a little bit about a course we offer in the Teaching Commons for TAs that we've had to redesign since we've moved to the remote or online environment. And I'm joined today by my colleague Lisa Endersby, who was a participant in the co-design as well as our facilitator for the course this fall. Lisa, would you like to say a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, thanks Natasha, and hi viewers, hi everybody. As Natasha mentioned, I'm Lisa Endersby. I'm also an educational developer in the Teaching Commons, and I have been facilitating, working with, and learning right alongside Natasha for the past couple of years with TACT. And this year, as Natasha mentioned, was my first time teaching TACT entirely remotely.
Great, thanks, Lisa. So we'll get back to Lisa in a moment, as I have some great questions to ask her about her experience so far facilitating the course entirely online, and a little bit of a comparison to the previous blended approach we took. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about the course. So I think we've been using this acronym, TACT, and so I should first say that TACT stands for the TA Certificate in Teaching. And this was initially designed in January of 2013, or at least that was the first time the course was offered. And it was designed as a blended approach. So we already had the benefit of an online component, but there were in-class sessions. And so we've had to make an adjustment to those in-class sessions so that there are now some synchronous sessions, and we've added some more components to the online modules. So currently, the course has 6 synchronous sessions for an hour and a half each, spread out over one term, and 5 online modules to be completed asynchronously. And I suppose the content of the course might be useful for you to know as well. And so our focus is on supporting TAs in teaching in higher education. So we focus a lot on supporting their role as a teaching assistant and also developing their teaching philosophy as well as their teaching dossier. And finally, maybe I'll just mention that the course is accredited by the Educational Developers Caucus, which essentially means the design was peer-reviewed. And so we are sort of having to align with that original design. And so we'll talk maybe a little bit more about that process with the design in a moment. But since I've said a lot about the course so far, let me turn to Lisa and ask her to sort of reflect on her experience in facilitating the course. We've had, I think, 4 sessions together where Lisa was facilitating and a guest lecture as well. And so knowing that Lisa also facilitated the course in its original design, let me ask you, Lisa, comparing your previous experience with TACT to this year's current experience as is unfolding, what has been the most difficult part of the synchronous session facilitation?
I really like this question because I think for me, moving away from being physically present with my students was probably the most challenging thing, and it actually still continues to be really challenging. So one thing that I really love about this course is the really immersive way that we get to explore topics in teaching and learning, but also the intensive experience that the students receive. Maybe some of the students would disagree with me on that, but being together in person. At the time, it was 3-hour sessions face-to-face every few weeks. And that face-to-face piece was so important for the type of course that this is. It's very driven by conversation, both peer-to-peer and instructor to students or participants. And I was very used to and very comfortable with doing that in a face-to-face environment. I feed off of that energy. I like eye contact and seeing my students. So it was really challenging to move to synchronous sessions where I didn't get that same kind of feedback, or if I'm honest, that same kind of validation. So the hardest part was reimagining what is good engagement in a synchronous session and what is my role in facilitating that, while also, I guess, being aware of my own energy and how I want to teach and teach best.
Great, thanks. Maybe I will ask you a little bit about your experience with the students, given that important connection that you've made in the past, and wondering how that connection is going now that we're a few weeks into the course, or I'm sorry, not a few weeks into the course, but a few sessions into the course, which is many more than a few weeks. Um, so what is your perception of how the students are experiencing the course?
Yeah, also a good question. And I may ask you, Natasha, for your thoughts too, because you've been in the synchronous sessions right along with me, and thank goodness for that. I would say its perception is interesting because someone much wiser than me once said, you teach the way you learn. And so I keep looking for active, visible engagement. And in that instance, what I have seen has been really positive. Students have been willing to type in the chat, they annotate my slides. Sometimes they'll even turn their cameras and their microphones on and engage with me that way. Of course, I'm talking about the synchronous sessions. In the modules, the asynchronous components, they have been engaged as well, but I think the experience is different. I think it's challenging because we work a lot, again, to establish presence and positivity, if I want to use an alliteration, where we want these interactions to be really positive and engaging and good for learning and good for deep learning. And I think they're still getting that, but it does depend on a lot of active participation and a lot of deep participation. And from what I can see, which is actually more product than it is process, I think that's going really well. Like, I'm seeing a lot of good critical thinking and a lot of engaged responses, but I don't know the process in the same way. Because if I was with them for 3 hours in the class, I might be able to view a little bit more of that scaffolded process where my presence and their presence is just different online. So I think the engagement is certainly there, but it's more, I'm seeing the results of engagement less than I'm seeing the engagement itself. Does that make sense, Natasha?
Absolutely. And I agree with you as well. I think reflecting on my own experience, having taught this course and then kind of observing you facilitate it right now. As a side note, we learned through the process that it's useful to have a co-facilitator, really just to manage some of the Zoom technicalities. And so that's been my role, and getting to kind of observe, which has been really helpful because I will be teaching the course in the winter term. And so getting a sense of seeing the differences has been really helpful for me, and sort of thinking about my practice. I guess what I really like about the redesign, and then thinking about my previous practice, has been that what I see missing, not missing entirely, but what I feel is difficult and something I don't know how to do well in the synchronous session, which I probably will remove as sort of a tactic for engagement with the students, is a kind of large group kind of discussion. I think that Lisa's done an amazing job of engaging them in large group text contributions, and then individuals able to unmute and participate, which has been really exciting. I think it's amazing that some of them are doing that. And so you can get a sense of what individuals are thinking, and it's a synchronous text conversation. And so I think there's less room for the large group discussion, or less time spent on that. I spent a lot of time in that, using that strategy in the face-to-face kind of environment. But what I really like about the change, and exactly as you say, there's more of a product that you can see. And so some of the changes we've made, and I think the one that's standing out for me is one activity that we had to adapt. So there was this kind of self or peer assessment activity where they wrote something and then exchanged their papers in the classroom. And then we did a kind of activity with a rubric to demonstrate sort of misalignment of rubrics and the importance of providing them in advance for fairness and all of that. And so we had to adjust that activity to make it work in this synchronous session. And so there was a bit more work that went in up front, in the sense of sort of designing a potential assignment, and then some rubrics that TAs designed, and having them have this conversation about comparing those rubrics. And so I think a lot of the process happens in a breakout room type of activity. So they still get to have those conversations, but they're more focused, and there's a direct outcome, as opposed to a discussion that can be big and be just as fruitful, but different.
Mm-hmm.
So what has been the biggest surprise for you, Lisa?
I think I'm enjoying it more than I thought I would, if I could be somewhat vulnerable and authentic. I definitely had a lot of trepidation and anxiety. And I will say Natasha is not just Zoom support, she's also emotional support. So if that's a plug for having a co-teacher or a co-facilitator in your online course in some capacity, it's both for you as much as it is for your students. But I was worried in part because we're doing something new, which is always challenging, right? Every time you redesign something and you're doing it for the first time, you just don't know how it's going to go. And so you worry. And for me, like, you worry every time because every synchronous session was adapted. So there's a lot of anxiety that goes into this. But with that anxiety, what surprised me the most was the student response and how these students, you always have to remember that for the most part, these students want to be here. I mean, I know that with everything going on, we're recording this in the middle of a global pandemic, and there are lots and lots of challenges and barriers to being engaged in a course. But for the most part, like, these students are so engaged. They reach out when they have challenges. I reach out to them to check in on them. And the engagement and the relationships that I'm building with these students, there's almost more room to do that in this redesign because we've had to adapt to privilege them showcasing the product of their work. And we've had to really think carefully, and will continue to do so, about how we are present in the course when we're not together. So there's been this really cool opportunity to be engaged and also to recognize that students know that we're human. That was a really nice surprise, that they weren't expecting perfection from me. They were expecting to be engaged perhaps, but they weren't expecting a perfect course. They were so much more forgiving of things that to me were monumental crises, and to them were like, it's okay that this is a day late, or it's okay that you didn't put the Zoom link in, like, it's all good. So when you stop treating students as like they're here, like out to get you, or they're watching what you're doing, no, they're right along with that process with you. And the feedback and the learning from them has been surprising, but also really fruitful.
Excellent. So maybe we'll wrap up this conversation, and I'll ask you, what is one lesson learned or key takeaway from this redesign or online facilitation that you'd like to share with our viewers?
That's a big question to end on, Natasha. But I think I would go back to this notion of presence. I've been reflecting on it a lot in the past few weeks, but even more broadly, not just with courses, but being online or doing things remotely, and how we understand what it means to be actively or visibly present. And in this case, particularly for our students, where we're still negotiating how much structure do we give, but how much is too much. We don't want to overwhelm them, but we want to keep them on track. We don't want them to feel overburdened, but we also want them to complete requirements and stay engaged with the course. And that may differ for every course and for every student and for every instructor, but I am learning the value of being present. And that doesn't mean continually checking in on my students or monitoring or surveilling, but it does mean maintaining this presence, this openness of, how are you doing? Let me check in with you. How's the course going? Being mindful that there's a process going on even when you're not in Zoom, and how can we not keep on top of things or keep on top of the students, but just how do we let them know that we're here, that they don't feel like they're submitting things and they go out into the e-class ether and they're never, looked at or responded to. So how do we have remote relationships, I guess, with our students, but being able to be more actively present, which doesn't mean quantity, sometimes it means quality, but I'm learning I want to do more of that. If for no other reason that students feel that I am accessible and that I am a compassionate instructor, even if I'm not always an organized or on top of it instructor.
Well, thanks very much, Lisa. I think you've given us a lot of things to think about, and hopefully this was helpful for anyone that's sort of going through the same process of redesigning existing courses, and knowing that it is a process and we're all learning together.
Absolutely. Thanks, Natasha.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.